Welcome to Excel magic trick number 1331. Hey, if you want to download this Excel workbook, Excel magic trick 1331 part 1 start, or the part 2 file so you can follow along, click on the link below the video. Wow, we have an amazing video here. Follow up on our last video, but in this video, we want to see how to import multiple Excel files with multiple Excel sheets into Excel, and we're going to use Power Query, also known as Get and Transform. Now, if we're importing multiple Excel files that have multiple tables, there's actually a few ways we can do this, and we're going to look at two of them. We're going to look at Append and Merge. Now, in our first example, we will have these 5 city sales files, and we need to import all of them and append them one on top of each other into a single table. And then for this example, we'll actually make this pivot table. Now I'm going to go to part 2, File. And in this example, we have 2 files, yes. But one of them looks like this. It is actually a lookup table. Here's our products. Here's our price. And down here, the second file is sales. This is what it looks like. It has date, product, units, and discount, but no price. So we need to import both of these tables and actually merge them into a single table, adding this price column. Now, the word merge is what we see in Power Query, but if you know how to do VLOOKUP to add an extra column, or create a power pivot relationship to get price so we can calculate total revenue, then you have the idea of how merge will work. Now let's go over to our first file, part 1. Let's go look at these files. Now when you download the files, you have to download this folder and unzip it called 1331 part 1 source data. And here are our files. Now, I actually threw a bunch of problems in here so that when we get all these files into Power Query, we'll see how to deal with potential pitfalls. The files we really want are Oakland, Portland, San Francisco, Seattle, and Tacoma. Now, one thing to notice, and we'll deal with this over in Power Query, is sometimes we have a .xlsx, sometimes we have a .xlsm. And look at that. Someone actually capitalized the extension. Not only that, but I threw a couple other files that are not Excel files in here just to see how we can filter out, because we're going to use an amazing feature where we actually point Power Query to the folder, and it will automatically bring everything into Power Query instead of individually 5 times having to pick out individual files. Now, we need to go look at these files. And notice that the city name is actually in the file. And Power Query will allow us to take the city name and use it inside the data set as an extra column called cities. So for the resultant table, each one of the records in each one of these files will be coded with the city name. Now let's go look at this Oakland file. Double-click, open it up. Oh, look down here. We have individual tabs. Fran, Gab, Poppy. Those are the sales rep. So not only are we going to need to get the city name from the file, but we're going to need to, for every transaction here, we need an extra column called sales rep, and we need to get the information from the sheet tab, Fran, into this extra column. Power Query will make that easy. Now, in this Excel workbook, there's an extra sheet that was not named. Now, I threw this in there just so we can see how to filter it out. Not only that, but I added a bunch of extra objects that will be imported when we import all these files, and we're going to need to filter them out. Let's go look at the Define Name dropdown. Oh, there's a print area, just like we saw in our last video. There's an actual defined name. There's also a table. So we'll have to filter those objects out. All right, so here's our data set: date, product, unit, sales. Then we need to get the sales rep information from the sheet tab and city from the file name. I'm going to close this file. All right, we're back in our part 1 file on the sheet product report. Now, in Excel 2016, Power Query is on the Data tab. Get and Transform group is Power Query. In Excel 2013 or 10, you have to download it and install it as a new tab. All right, let's do this. We're going to go to New Query, From File. And that From File button is just on the Power Query tab in earlier versions. Then we go down to this amazing feature, From Folder. Folder dialog box wants us to browse. And there it is, the folder we downloaded and unzipped. Now I'm telling Power Query to point to this folder. Any files and any subfolders with files, all of those files will be imported. Click OK. Click OK. This is an intermediate step if you have the latest version of Power Query. We want to click Edit, not Load. We want to Edit. Here's our Power Query editor. First thing I'm going to do is come over and name this. This is going to be our All City Tables, and Enter. Notice that's a property. We don't get an extra step when we rename it. Now, what did Power Query do? These are all the files in that folder with information about the files, a lot of things we do not need. This has the content of each file. Here's the name, which we're going to use. And we want to start with extension. So I'm going to click on Extension. Now, 2 videos ago, I showed you an important aspect of filtering with Power Query. Power Query filter is case sensitive. Now, let's just imagine for a second we didn't know that. We thought we were over in Excel. What we really need to do in this column is we only want file extensions that have .xls because we want the M and the X. So I'm going to come up here and do a contains filter, text filter, contains. And I'm going to type .xls. And when I click OK, whoa, wait a second. It filtered out the capital ones, and that's not what I want. So I'm going to come over here to Applied Steps and click the red X. What we want to do first is we want to make all of these lowercase. Transform. Over in the text, we go to Format. And please give us lowercase. You can also right-click, Transform, lowercase. Boom, there we go. We never had to worry about that over in Excel, but here in Power Query, we have to be keenly aware that filters are case sensitive. Now I'm going to say text filters contains .xls. Click OK. Just like that, we have filtered out any files that don't contain .xls. Now, interestingly enough, this filter we used would import a .xls or a .xlsb. However, both of those file types are more difficult to deal with when you're gathering up files from a folder. And I'll point something out later in the video about that. So in general, we want to stick with the .xlsx or .xlsm. Now, we need to get rid of everything after the dot here so we have our actual city names we can use in our resultant tables. So I'm going to come up to Transform, Split Column by a delimiter. Our delimiter, that will be a marker in this text that'll split, and for us it'll be dot. Click the drop down, Custom, I'm going to say dot. And actually, I'm going to be careful here. I'm going to say at the rightmost delimiter in case someone had a file name with a dot. Our cities are not going to have that, but it pays to be careful. When I click OK, sure enough, it split it. Now look over here. It adds this extra step. It changed the type. I don't really need that. Now, it's perfectly all right to leave it in there, but I'm going to X that out and get rid of it. Now, we don't need any of these columns here. All I want is the city name and the content. So I'm going to click on Content. Then I'm going to hold Shift and click on Name. Right-click, Remove Other Columns. Now, these are Excel files, not text files like CSV or TXT. We cannot click that button to expand. That double downward pointing arrow is for text files. We actually are going to have to add an extra column and use Excel.Workbook function to get at all of the objects in these files. So I come up to Add Column, Add Custom Column. I'm going to come up and name this Get Excel Objects. Now, you don't have to name columns. Lots of people leave them custom, but I always like to give everything a smart name. You never know when that smart name is going to help. And we're going to use Excel.Workbook function. Now, last video we saw Excel.CurrentWorkbook. Excel Workbook will get these objects from these external files. Now, we want to double click on content. That means in the content column for each file, it will get the objects. And we want to type a comma. First argument is the content. Second argument is going to be, do we want to promote headers? And we do. Type true. Now, that's a much different true than in Excel. Those all have to be lowercase letters for Excel.Workbook to understand that we should promote headers. That means when we append all these tables and stack them one on top of each other, there will be a single listing of field names at the top. The remaining field names in all the tables below will not have that field name included as a record in the data set. All right, we have our formula. I'm going to click OK. There's our column. We can come to Content, right-click, Remove. Now we have our sideways double pointing arrows, which will allow us to expand and get to our data. I'm going to click it. I definitely want to uncheck Use Original Column Name as Prefix. We do not want these names. We want all these names. When I click OK, we have a bunch of new columns. There's our city name. This name gives us the name of the object. This column, kind, tells us what type of object. Is it a sheet? Is it a table? Is it a defined name? We also have hidden, and notice there was something filtered in the Oakland file. That created a defined name that was hidden. All the rest of the objects are not hidden. There's our data, and kind is similar to the name with a slight difference. You can see like the filter name here has sheet name. Now, we're going to use the kind column. And as we mentioned last video, Excel.CurrentWorkbook didn't have this. So we actually had to add an extra column and do some fancy stuff. But here, I can simply click the filter, Text Filters, and I want only objects that equal sheet. Capital S-H-E-E-T, click OK. And just like that, now I have all of the sheets. Now, we do have a problem here because our name column has our sales rep names. There's a sheet left over. So we're going to filter out any sheets that have the default name sheet. Click the drop down. Text filters. We want does not begin with sheet. I guess this assumes that we don't have any sales rep that have the name sheet. If we did, we'd have to know that and do something different. Click OK. That is amazing. There's our city names from the file name. There's our sales rep names from the sheet names. There's our data. Now, we don't need any of these columns. And watch this. I need to highlight all these and then right-click Remove Other Columns. But I'm going to highlight them in a certain order. And here's why. I'm going to click on Data first. Then I'm going to hold the Control key, and I'm clicking on Name second, and still holding Control, Sales Rep Name column third. By highlighting it 1, 2, 3, when I right-click Remove Other Columns, instantly it removes the other columns, but it puts it in the exact order in which I selected the columns. That's pretty cool, and that's the order that I wanted them. Now we can finally click on the Expand button to get to our transactional records. I definitely want to uncheck this because I want to use these names. Those are the field names from our tables. When I click OK, that is amazing. Our transactional data and then repeated from our file name and sheet name all the proper city and sales rep. Now we need to go through each one. Click on Date, Home, or Transform to get at Data Type. I'm going to say Data Type Date. Product, by the way, we can also use right-click, Change Type, and this is going to be text. Right-click, Change Type, whole numbers. Sales, whichever method you like. Decimal. Text, it already got it. Didn't get text there, so I'm going to say text. And there is our table ready to go. We have the proper name. There's all our memorized steps. Let's close. Close and load to. And I'm going to put this as a new table on a new worksheet. Click OK. There is our table. Over here we can see our query, 50,000 plus records. Also, our table has been automatically named. Design, Table Tools, Properties, and there is the name. So the name of the resultant table and the query are the same. Now I want to create a pivot table from this imported appended data set. Insert, Pivot Table, or we can use the keyboard Alt-N-V. I'm going to accept the default on a new worksheet, and instead of clicking OK, it's the highlighted button, so I hit Enter. Now I want to drag date down to the rows. Remember, these are individual transaction dates. When I drop it down here, I'm using Excel 2016. It automatically groups. Now I do not want quarters, and I do not want date. All I want is years. I'm going to put years all the way up into columns. Drag product down to rows. Our pivot table is starting to emerge. Sales rep. And look at that. I completely violated proper naming conventions. Well, watch this. Right in the middle of the pivot table, I'm coming over to the workbook queries. Right-click, Edit. I am back to my editing window. Double-click the field name, or we're going to call this, of course, City. Enter. Double-click. We're going to call this Sales Rep. Enter. Now, I've already closed and loaded this to a sheet, so I simply have to click this button, and it will update. I'm going back over to my sheet, which I see I have not named yet. Double-click, and I'm going to call this PT. Enter. Now I'm looking at my field list. What? They're not there. I have to come over. When you use Power Query to import into a table and you have a pivot table, you have to refresh twice. Once in the table and then once in the pivot table. Right-click, refresh, and look at that. That's pretty amazing to be able to go back into Power Query and update. All right, I'm dragging sales rep down below product. Now, sales down to values. I immediately want to come somewhere in the pivot table values area and right-click. I do not want to use format cells. I want to use number formatting to actually add number formatting to the field sales. So I select number, use a separator, 0 decimals, click OK. Immediately, I'm going to come up, and for sum of sales, I'm going to add in parentheses the unit, Enter. That way I don't clutter up my report. Row labels and column labels are terrible, so design, layout, report layout, show in tabular. Now watch this. I'm actually going to add a slicer here. Analyze, filter, insert slicer. And now I'm going to add a slicer for criteria that I already have in my pivot table. I want products. Click OK. Now, why in the world would I do that? There's all of our products. Well, here's why. I'm going to select Aussie Round, Carlota, and instantly it is filtered. And I have the Carlota listed over here, including the Carlota total. If I want to see them all, I can see them all. Select Bellin. Now, I want to go back, and there's another file that you can download. Let's go over and look in Windows Explorer. Now, you can download this as one of the files, and if I double-click and open it, it's just the sales rep sheets with all the sales for the city of San Jose. So I'm going to close this file, and I'm going to drag it into our folder. Remember, Power Query is pointing towards that folder. If I double click and open it, boom, there they all are, and there is San Jose. Now when I go back to my sheet with the report, I come over to my workbook queries. By the way, if that's not open, Data, Show Queries, but I want to right-click, Refresh. And there it is, New Records. Now I go to my pivot table, right-click, Refresh. And just like that, I have my updated report. All right, so our first example of taking multiple sheets from multiple Excel files went like this. We had our files, and we did append. Now I'm going to close Part 1 workbook. All right, we're now on the Part 2 file. And here's our goal. We still have multiple tables we need to import, but this time instead of appending, we need to merge. Here's the lookup table. We need all the proper prices for each one of the products. Actually, as a new column in this sales table, this is what the end result is going to look like. Actually, this is not what the end result is going to look like. We're going to add an extra column with a formula that calculates our sales because we do not need units, discount, or price in our final table. All right, so let's see how to import these two tables and merge them. Data, New Query, From File, and we're actually going to import the files one at a time and then merge them. So I'm going to say From File, From Workbook. Navigate to our source folder, and I'm going to select Sales first. We're importing a single Excel file. We get our navigator window that will list all of our objects. We want only the sheet sales. There's our preview. I'm going to click Edit. Sales table is an OK name because it's going to be loaded as connection. It will not be our final table. There are some steps it did, and it looked like it got pretty much everything correct. Date, text for product. It got units, which 1, 2, 3 means a whole number. You can see that up here. And 1.2 is the icon that means decimal. So it got it pretty much correct. Come up to Close and Load 2. We want to select Only, create a connection, and load. We can see over here it's loaded. Now we go get our second table. New Query, From File, From Workbook. Double-click Product Prices. Now notice there's a few objects here. I simply want the one sheet with the one table. I'm going to click Edit. Prices is a fine name. There's our steps. It looked like it got the first column of our lookup table with a unique list of products. It got text right. It got data type decimal for our price. Now we can come up to Close and Load 2. Only a connection, click Load. Here's our two tables. Now we come back up to New Query, Combine Queries, and we want to merge. We select our sales table. Here's our product column. If we were doing VLOOKUP, VLOOKUP would look up each one of these items. Notice this column is allowed to have repeats. Now we come down and find our lookup table. Or if we're using Power Pivot, this would be our dimension table. There's our prices. There's our unique list. VLOOKUP would look this item up, find a match, and then return the price, creating an extra column. If we were in Power Pivot, we would have a one-to-many relationship that would allow us to use the price in this table. Now, join con, we want inner only matching rows. Now I click OK. There's our sales table, and here's a new column. We're going to select Expand. I do not want all the columns. I only want the price column. And I want to make sure and unselect this. I do not want the column name from over here. I just want price. Click OK. And there is our VLOOKUP helper column. Now, I actually don't want any three of these columns, so I am going to calculate in an extra column here our sales. The formula is going to be units times price times 1 minus the discount. Let's add an extra column. Add custom column. We're going to call this revenue. Now look at this. I have my fields over here. I can double-click units. Hey, units times, and double-click price. But we have a discount, and that discount is something that should be subtracted from the total amount. So times, and then in parentheses 1, that represents the full price, minus whatever the discount is. Close parentheses. Now we have a bunch of decimals and sometimes extraneous decimals past the penny position. So we need to round this to get exact penny amounts. Now we're going to make an error here, but this will be a useful trick for learning new things about Power Query. I'm going to assume that the name of the function is round, and I'm even going to assume that I have the case right. Now there it is. I come to the end, comma 2, because I want to round to the penny, close parentheses. Look at this. It says no syntax errors have been detected. So I'm going to say OK. And look at that. The name round was not recognized. Well, I'm going to go right out to Google, and I'm going to type Power Query round function and enter. And there it is. Here's the one from Microsoft. Oh, look at that. I bet you I should put Number.Round. If I click on this, here it is, Number.Round. Now here's the description of the arguments. The first one is simply the number. The second one is the number of digits. And there's this third argument here. Here's the description. And the way it describes it here is what happens when the last digit is 5. And there's some options, and they're listed here. Now the amazing thing about the Power Query Number.Round is that if we leave this last argument empty, it assumes this last one, which is banker's round, which is more accurate over large sets of numbers than our standard rounding that we use in school. Not only that, but the banker's rounding algorithm is the same one that's used by Excel VBA and Access. All right, let's go back to our Excel workbook. Now I've added this column. I'm simply going to double-click to edit this. And right before here, I'm going to type Number.Round. And now when I click OK, there it is. Now I'm going to select these 3 columns. Units, hold Shift, select Price, right-click, Remove. And there's our final columns. Oh, I say I almost violated our most important naming convention. Always name things smartly. This will be the revenue table, and enter. Now we want to add a data type. Data type, decimal. Now up to close and load. Close and load. Actually, if I click close and load right here, it automatically puts it on a new sheet. There's our table. There's our final query. Double click, and I'm going to call this something like a revenue table, and enter. Now I'm going to click in a single cell and make a quick pivot table, Alt-NV. I definitely want to put this on a different sheet. The location, sales report, A1. Click OK. Date, I'm going to drag down to rows. I'm going to drag the individual date off. Product down below months. Revenue down to values. Right-click. Expand and collapse. Expand entire field. Right-click somewhere in values. Number formatting. I'm going to say currency, 0 decimal. Click OK. Up to design, report layout, show in tabular. And that's pretty amazing. We created pivot table from this merge table from 2 external Excel files. Wow, that was a lot of amazing fun with importing multiple Excel files using Power Query. We saw how to merge 2 tables into a single table. And we also saw how to take multiple Excel files and append them all using the From Folder feature. All right, that was a lot of fun with Power Query. We'll see you next video.